Sampling. Now that you have prepared for sampling, it's time to travel to your sampling site. We suggest bringing hand sanitizer as well as insect repellent for buggy sites. Wear closed-toed shoes that you don't mind getting wet or muddy. Once settled, make sure all your materials are with you. 3 thawed media bottles for each site. These should already be labeled by site and replicate. At least 1 sterile pipette per site. We recommend bringing an extra just in case. An ice pack and a thermometer. You should also have a data sheet for each site. You already filled out several fields of the data form when you prepared for sampling. Now it's time to fill out some additional information. Remember to write legibly. When you get to your site, record the date of sampling in the month, day, year format. Record the time when you started collecting your water sample in the field. Select the correct water body condition for your site from the following options. Adequate depth refers to about 5 inches or more of water. Inadequate depth should be recorded if your site has less than 5 inches of water. If you have inadequate depth, still collect the air and water temperature. Dry means that virtually no water is visible at your site, or the stream is in isolated, shallow pools. If you find that your site is dry and you aren't able to collect a water sample, you should still measure the air temperature and submit that data. This information is critical to document periods of drought. No access means that your site is temporarily inaccessible due to an obstruction, closed road, etc. For tidally influenced rivers, note that in coastal areas, while testing bays and rivers whose flow and level are influenced by tides, monitors aware of the stage of the tide may record it as rising, falling, or uncertain. Monitors testing away from the coast should select not applicable. Complete the remainder of the data form following instructions in each section of the variables. Remember to collect your sample at approximately the same location each time you sample, and always collect your water sample upstream from where you are standing. We'll start with air temperature. Always take air temperature before water temperature for the most accurate readings. Upon arrival at your site, find a place in the shade where you can place, preferably hang, the dry thermometer. If you do not have shade, you can create shade with your body. Allow the thermometer to remain in the shade until the temperature stabilizes. This will usually take 2 to 3 minutes. To read the temperature, hold the thermometer by the eyelet at eye level. Remember, never touch the bulb of the thermometer, as you will end up measuring your body temperature instead of the air. Read and record the temperature to the nearest ½ degree Celsius on your data form. Once you finish measuring air temperature, you are ready to measure the water temperature. If possible, find a location that is shady and in the same area of the water body where you plan to collect your sample. Submerge the thermometer in the water about 2 to 3 inches. It may be necessary to anchor the thermometer to prevent loss in strong currents, cloudy water, or deep water. This can be done by tying a cord through the eyelet and attaching it to a stable object. If no such object is present, you can hold the thermometer in place. Try to avoid allowing the thermometer to rest on dark rocks, as it will affect the temperature reading. Leave the thermometer in the water for 2 to 3 minutes. Once the temperature stabilizes, read the thermometer while it is still submerged or immediately after removing it from the water. Record the temperature to the nearest ½ degree Celsius on your data form. Now we will collect the water sample. It is a good idea to set up your media bottles in a way that will allow you to easily reach them. Once you are ready to sample, unwrap a sterile pipette from the bulb end and avoid touching the tip of the pipette with anything except the sample water. Fill the pipette with sample water. Be careful to not disturb the bottom of the stream. Carefully squeeze the bulb and expel excess water to the desired sample volume. 1 milliliter sample volume is recommended and is usually sufficient. Keep in mind, when you release the pipette bulb, air bubbles will enter the pipette. This is okay. You will still have 1 milliliter of water sample, but it is not okay to have air bubbles in the pipette when you are initially squeezing down to the 1 milliliter line. Be sure to use the same volume for each of the 3 replicates and record the sample volume on your data form. Remove the cap from the bottle of media and hold it without touching the inside. Squirt the sample water into the bottle of liquid media without placing your hand or face over the opening. Cap the bottle securely and make sure you have a system in place to avoid putting 2 samples in the same bottle. For instance, you could take all of your media bottles out of the Ziploc bag before collecting the sample. Once you've finished adding the sample water to a bottle, return that bottle to the Ziploc bag so that you don't risk picking it up again. Repeat these steps until all 3 media bottles are inoculated with water from the same spot. Once you finish collecting your samples, place the media bottles inside the cooler. If at any point you drop your pipette or it is otherwise contaminated, you should use a new pipette. Keep in mind that media must be plated within 3 hours of collecting the sample and should remain on ice and out of direct sunlight at all times. Don't forget to use hand sanitizer before leaving the field and wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water once you return home. Before leaving your site, fill out the bottom section of your data form labeled Comments. This is where you can include any information related to water conditions that might help you better understand your data. Examples include documentation of recent rainfall events, unusual odors, changes in the stream color or flow. And this is also a place you can note why and if you were unable to conduct any of the tests. For instance, if you noticed your thermometer is broken when you were in the field. Lastly, this is a place to note any exciting critters or discoveries you notice while sampling.